In September of 2014, I was hired as a in-home family therapist for a family of 4 by Children's Division. It was a mom and a dad and 2 daughters, both teenage, and the oldest daughter we'll call Beth. She was 15 years old, and she and her son, her infant son, were in foster care. One Friday afternoon, as I was getting ready to do a family therapy session, I noticed that Beth and her mom were looking at homecoming dresses. And so I went over and peeked over their shoulder and commented how pretty the dresses were and asked Beth if she was excited about homecoming. She looked up without making eye contact and shared that she wasn't going. She had been told by her caseworker that she couldn't go to homecoming. New moms don't get to go to homecoming, and now that she's a mom, she didn't get to go. I was so frustrated. I was so hurt for Beth. How difficult is it to be a mom? How difficult is it to be a teen mom? How difficult is it to be a teen mom who's full of shame? Because that was the look on her face. She was full of shame. How would that affect her future or even her son's future? So I'm focusing on the grand challenge of ensuring the healthy development of youth. My problem focus is child welfare and that it's failing to protect the children it's mandated to serve. There are several norms that hold this problem in place, but the norm that I'm most focused on is the default position that child welfare believes that it is the expert of the children and families that it serves. So this is a pretty huge impact. Kids have been coming into state care in record numbers in Kansas and Missouri. In fact, in 2011 to 2018, it went up 7% annually in Kansas. There are over 3,000 children in state custody in Kansas City alone. Kansas and Missouri are both being sued by Children's Rights for failure to protect the children they're mandated to protect. Both Kansas and Missouri have failed to meet over 50% of the federal standards and guidelines for foster care, including engagement of clients, the safety, timely permanency, and stable placements. So what's being done to give youth a voice? Almost nothing. In Missouri, we have the youth advisory panels that children are able to apply when they turn 17. But if you came into care and custody at age 7 and you failed to reach permanency and you're now 17, for 10 years you had no voice, you had no platform to have a voice. Missouri does have a Foster Children's Bill of Rights. It was signed into law in 2017, but it's not followed. There's no accountability for it. Kansas does not. So significant problem. Kids' adverse childhood experiences scores are going up while they're in care and custody. So my innovation is entitled Operation Hope. I have partnered with CASA. I began that relationship in October of 2018. Met with them several times, did a napkin pitch. My innovation has 2 components. The first component is to create a comic book that teaches children and families how to have a voice and how to use their voice. The second would be to create an app that would teach children and families how to have a voice and use a voice. And in that app, I would include gamification components where they can develop their own superhero avatar and go on missions and challenges, defeat Dr. Trauma, and learn how to have a voice. And maybe from that, develop, like an Angie's List or a Rate My Professor, but based on child welfare. So my inspiration comes from, unfortunately, the shooting in Parkland, Florida, and the March for Our Lives movement. People wrote the kids off saying that they're kids, what do they know about gun control and gun issues? But they're pretty media savvy, and they've done a lot to keep it in the forefront in the media. Can you imagine if we used that voice and that savvy for child welfare and gave them a voice and a seat at the table? Man, how inspiring would that be? So there'll certainly be some challenges and some barriers. Families and children are often afraid to have a voice, afraid they'll never go home, reunification won't occur. Transparency is driven by this other norm, this default position of confidentiality because all children are so vulnerable. And they are a marginalized, vulnerable population. Certainly fear of the unknown. I visited with a researcher from Penn State, and she shared with me that change is the agent, is the enemy agent for child welfare systems. That fear of change. So, my innovation is unique. It is grounded on evidence-based practices. Shared decision-making has been an evidence model for healthcare for years, but not so much in mental health care or in child welfare. There is a feedback-informed model called FIT, which is an evidence-based model driven by Scott Miller and Barry Duncan. It is researched and shown to be evidence-based practice, where the client is able to share how they feel about their treatment services. Are they working on what they want to work on? Do they feel like their clinician is listening to them? All of that increases treatment compliance rather than treatment fallout. It's also unique in the sense that I'm going to use superheroes and comic books. It certainly captures the imagination of people. The movies are very popular. Comic books are a steady market, very popular. And two examples that have driven social change issues. The first one was a comic book that was published in 1957 called The Martin Luther King Montgomery Story. It was, in essence, a how-to guide how to peacefully protest. It inspired the Woolworth Four. It inspired Congressman John Lewis. It inspired Rosa Parks. It is considered the most dangerous comic book. 250,000 copies were published and passed around in the South in the 1960s. And if you were found to have one, you could get into some trouble. A more recent example is Faith. Faith is a superhero. She partnered with the Keep a Breast Foundation to teach young women about breast self-exams. You shouldn't be checking your breasts when you're 30 and 35 and 40 years old. You should begin as a young woman. And it is powerful, for she talks to young women about self-exam and the importance of not starting when you're 40. These comic books were made available on OBGYN clinics. They were free for young women. Again, what a great tool to push such an important message. So, sustainability. I don't have a budget at this point. My goal is to produce 1,000 comics to hand out through CASA, my collaboration with CASA. I will use crowdfunding, and if I need to, the Green Light Fund, which is an organization in Kansas City that funds social projects. Certainly out of the gate, I want to publish 1,000 books and have those distributed, which wouldn't even cover 50% of the kids in foster care. I'd like to develop a qualitative study to look at what kind of long-term changes at the macro level could this innovation create. Maybe I can get a foster children's bill of rights in the state of Kansas. Maybe more organizations will turn to feedback-informed treatment and shared decision-making. Or maybe I can develop an Angie's List through my app. So you remember Beth not getting to go to homecoming? Well, I was Beth's voice and Beth's advocate, and she went to homecoming. And CASA bought her a dress, and I helped get her a new caseworker. But Beth wasn't able to do that for herself. It is time that child welfare start listening to their clients. They are the expert on themselves. It's time for them to partner to the table in shared decision making. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to continuing to move this innovation. I need your help. Please log into my website or please follow me on my Twitter feed. And together we will make kids into heroes because it's time. Thank you so much.